about 20 hours into a 48-hour fast, and it is killing me. I'm really hoping the mic can't pick up the fucking
Why
gurgling
why
that's
are you
happening.
why are you fasting?
Um, a lot of health benefits that I've read about and researched on, and for me in particular, I think it's a gut-mind connection that I'm looking for. I think a lot of people are addicted to food, and especially here in the States, and eat more out of habit than necessity. And I would like
Yeah,
to
yeah,
get
yeah.
to that place where, my
Do
body's
you
telling me what I need.
do you do it periodically or annually or?
I intermittent fast every day. So I do a 20 to 4 window. So 20-hour fast, 4-hour eating window. And then the prolonged fasts are just like kind of new this year. This will be like the second longest fast I've done. So we're getting there.
Hmm. Learn something today. From Sydney, Australia, all the way to Portland, USA, two misfits hang out after class to riff on the B-sides of professional life. These are your professional misfits. All the way from Sydney, Australia, I am your host, Christopher Sellers.
And from Portland, Oregon, I'm Brody Ipox.
And we are your professional misfits, where we riff on the B-sides of professional life. And this was supposed to be episode 14, Misfits, with my friend Mathilde. And we tried, she's currently traveling the world right now. She's currently in Sri Lanka. We tried for an episode with her yesterday, but she's literally in a little village where they have to pay for data and bandwidth. And that they didn't have the connection to sustain a podcast episode. So we shuffled her to a couple of episodes later where she'll then be in New Zealand in a couple of weeks where she'll have a decent internet connection. So Brody and I had to come up with something on the fly for this little mini arc of relationships and sort of in this family zone of relationships. And what we've come up with is a discussion on marriage. So, is marriage the end game? Is marriage the peak and pinnacle for all relationships and families? And this is what it should be, and this is how it is because everyone says so. So, Brody, of course, the neither of us are married, but you should be. You've
Yeah.
got a couple of kids, you've got a long-term partner, so
Yeah, I think maybe by common law I am.
well, or you're a delinquent living in sin, and you're all gonna burn in hell.
Oh, let's hope not. Let's hope
Right? Well, it's a 100% misfit move. So, all right, let's break it down. Like, is marriage the end game for everyone, and where does it sit for you in your kind of relationship?
good. Yeah, good question. So I mean, I want to say yes and no to the first, where I do believe that level of commitment is the end game. Do I
Okay.
believe the complex of marriage itself, the way that it is in today's society, is the end game? No. I mean,
The
not
institution of marriage.
right. Not necessarily for me. Again, I think more for the ceremony and the commitment, it makes sense. But yeah, I just what it is today. It's not for me. And to tie that, into the initial statement as to I'm not married. I have 4 kids with someone, a fifth on the way. By the way, Misfits. I'm gonna just drop that right here.
That's a misfit breaking news story. There you
Misfit
go.
baby, misfit baby.
Misfit baby. Misfit
But
announcement.
yeah, so I should be right, but again, in today's society where it's kind of more about legal bounds and financial unity, there's certain situations, especially for myself in the past 5 years, where it just hasn't made sense. And
Mm-hmm.
if I was to do that, it would put her at a disadvantage because of some of the debts that I had. And I mean, that's number one. And then number two, for me, again, it's the commitment of, and I think I really struggle with people being, or people needing a piece of paper to make that commitment beforehand,
Mm-hmm.
right? And like, to me, it's like you said, that's like the institution of it. It's like, here's the piece of paper, you guys do this now. And it's like, no, we should do this beforehand. And when we're at that level together and we've seen that come together in a healthy way, then let's talk about binding ourselves together legally for the rest of our lives. And I think, if I'm being honest with you, my biggest thing is too, like, I only want to do it once. Realistically, truly, I only want to do it once. And that's not to say anything bad about who I'm with. That's not to say anything bad about who I've been with in the past. It's just, yeah, it's just that there's something about that to me that, I've, I've walked with caution. I haven't just been the one that's like, oh, everybody's getting married. We've been together this long. Let me just propose.
Yeah, yeah.
No, like, if there's ever been, a situation where I'm questioning, or it didn't feel right, or anything, I listen to those. And it's not to say that you can't get through these kind of things and these aren't negotiables, but again, when we're talking about the gravity that it has in today's world,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like in my own world and my own path, I've played it smart, not safe, smart. And a lot of people aren't doing that. So that's just me. That's just me. And it's weird. And I think a lot of people do look at me and go, well, what the hell, dude?
Well, that leads into my next little provoking question: is like, do you get static from either Tiff or the in-laws or friends or family or whatever else who kind of look at you and like, come on, man, like, do the right thing,
All
you
the
know?
above.
Right.
All the above. All the above. And even my mother, before she passed, she said kind of the same thing I said earlier about common law. She goes, I mean, if you look at it, you guys technically are. And it's like, yeah, but again, we're not, and it's hard because I think their hearts are all in the right place.
Mm-hmm.
I get why they're making the gesture. I get why they have the opinions that they have, but at the same time, it's just not the same as it was for them. So I have a really easy time, or an easier time, I think, than most, brushing shit off that I don't think applies to me. And
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
that's just people that haven't been in that situation, people that don't have the experience that I might need. So yeah, I do get static, but it is become that. It's static, it's white noise, like, I
Yeah.
know I'm gonna have that view cast upon me because I'm not the norm. But teach their own, right? I mean, that's how it
Yeah.
should be. And if I'm being honest, even the people that are close to me, right? And I don't say this maliciously, but it's none of your fucking business.
Straight up.
I mean, realistically, it's
Straight
just
up.
none of your
Yep.
fucking business. So, and if there's any contingency of how you see me because I am or am not married at where I'm at in my life, that shit sits weird with me as well. Like, why? What?
Mm.
You have no idea what's gone on in my world. So why does it matter in that level to you? But
I think it's interesting, and obviously it's easy enough to say like, oh, different generations, times have changed, blah blah. Like anyone, like if we rewound 20 to even 30 years to Brody at 1920, who'd accidentally had a kid with someone, well, the expectation is, well, you better make a wife of her. Like you got to do the right thing, So that was it was almost to make the kid legal and less of a scandal. Like you're going to
oh,
bind
totally,
yourself, and,
totally.
and the respectability of the woman, and a little bit for you, and all that sort of thing. That sort of generation and that sort of expectation. And even when I look at my folks, I mean, they're a little different because it's like their lives have run parallel ever since their 20s. They met early 20s, they were married soon after, they had kids, then they worked the jobs. They haven't really had any seem to have any major obstacles there. as you would write out the nuclear family on paper, that's how they
No
that's how they
deviation from the plan.
totally and
Right.
that worked for them, and those standards and relationships at that time and for them served. Now, what we're getting into here is marriage the end game for everyone? And again, we're two straight guys talking about this, and for some of my queer friends, this hasn't always sort of been the luxury of an option.
I
And
was going to say, not always been an option, even.
right. And so this is, I guess we'll detour a little bit into maybe the differences of Australia and the US just for the moment, because
Mm-hmm.
in Australia, I believe it's legal federally
Okay.
for anyone to be married or have a civil union. Um, when it comes to specific religious groups, they might say yes, no, maybe so. You can't do that
Mm-hmm.
here, but you can go and be joined somewhere else. But
Right. And they
for a
have that
long, yeah,
sanctity because of religion. Right.
right. And so for a long time, and we voted on it probably only recently within the last 5 or 10 years, to make it a federal legal right for gays, lesbians, anyone, um, to have that legal binding union or not to be excluded from that. I don't. Is it the same in the States, or is it different per state?
So this is where the misfits can chime in because I'm not 100% sure. I want to say that on some federal level it's been acknowledged here as well
Mm-hmm.
because of the issue it presents, but I do think it's still to state level. I
Interesting.
think it's yeah, and again, it's kind of the same thing that I was talking about withholding marriage for my own situation. Like who fucking cares? I mean like it, and really the go ahead,
Well,
go ahead.
no, I look. I agree with you. I agree with you. And I even had gay friends at the time. They're like I live with him. We fuck every day. We have dogs. We have cars. We have our own debts. Like, who gives a fuck? But here's the thing. Like, all of a sudden, all of a sudden, there's a club, and you can't join it. Why? Because you got tats, Brody, and we
Okay.
don't. And we don't want
Okay.
you.
Okay.
Right. Or you
Okay.
got, or you're brown, Chris. We don't want you. You can't join because of this reason. Well, of course you're going to arc up and say, "Who the fuck are you? Why not? Why can't I? Why do you have certain rights that I don't?" And I think that's a legitimate human right conversation to have.
Hmm.
Excuse me. And that's an entirely separate debate with a lot of things, but we're talking about marriage specifically at the moment. And so I guess when we start to peel it back in this way, it's like, well, we talk about marriage, we talk about commitment. Are they one and the same? Is marriage the ultimate embodiment of commitment? Is it a romanticized ideal? Is it I want to get to this a little bit later. Is it different for boys than it is for girls? Because
Mm,
I've got two female friends at the moment, one of whom is getting married in 2 weeks, one of whom should have been married last week but had to have it cancelled, and we'll get into that as well. So two very different experiences there, and in both cases, it seems like the grooms are kind of just passengers to this event, and you giggle because I'm sure you recognize it.
after a certain point, it seems like the male figure in that situation is loss of control. And again, I don't know if that's just the outside looking in because I haven't been in a marriage myself. And it's funny, not to detour too far because I want to walk this path, but for you, I mean, specifically, you've been in a long term relationship. Why haven't you married?
Yeah, it's probably for all the same reasons that you did. I know I've touched on it in a previous episode where it's like, do you really see me as a husband? And she was like, fuck no. I'm like, right. So, but if you and I like want to, like, I don't know, have the party, but then like travel the world for 6 months and do all of that, then like absolutely like committed relationship. Same thing, commitment to you. Marriage, yeah. Like even and maybe and to be honest, like maybe it was just subconscious or sixth sense saying, well, marriage not with you, because
Mm.
there's a part of me now, maybe with a little bit of age, like I'd like the party. I'd like the party. I don't, man, fuck. I don't think I'll ever be anyone's husband, you know, but I could easily meet, a misfit girl, and we could have the misfit wedding, and maybe even have the misfit kids, who knows, and have the misfit careers and have the misfit life, but it won't be white picket fences. It won't be in the suburbs. It won't be any of that. So yeah.
I'm just gonna say this. I'm just gonna interrupt. Personally, I could see you getting married, and the reason being, and it's funny that the reason I say this is because I do think that if you found someone, from what I know of you, my friend, you like learning, and if you found someone you were constantly learning, and you found someone again
That's
that
a bit
was
insightful. Yeah, go on.
accepting of the way you operate, I think you'd become intoxicated with it, and it would become a chase. And can I learn this person ultimately? And then you would realize you can't. And I see
Yeah,
you, and I see you in that, and it's funny that you represented it the way you did, because I see it that way too. It wouldn't be normal. It wouldn't be a white
no,
picket
no,
fence and going off, and you guys settled down into a career for 20. It's not that. It's
no.
no.
But what? It's funny because what you described sounds like fun, and I'd be down for that. I would be down for that. And the funny thing is, the funny thing is as well is like I've got I've got my little like wedding entrance planned in the back of my head. I've got this whole event, and so the idea of like it's the girls' special day, and the guys are just there. And I'm like, fuck that! Like I'm getting married.
Yep.
I'm like I'm. This is my, I'll have a spotlight. Thank you. I'll have a moment. Like this isn't just your day. Like it's our day.
Hmm.
And I think part of the contract, or the to be contingent in a relationship with me, is we will spend the rest of our lives trying to one up each other on who's into each other the most. And
That's the
that's
learning.
well,
That's
yeah, I'm not giving that up. I'm not giving up and I can't anyway, because I've got a funny little brain, which you've probably all figured out by now. So this excitement, this chase, this challenge, this fun, like I'm not giving that shit up. And no, it won't fade over time. It will get richer and more, and whatever over time. So that's what I want from my relationship. Like I'm going to want you as much as you want me, but it's on each of us to demonstrate that. And I don't think, yeah. And so if it comes with rings, great. If it comes with a party, great. I've got little secret plans in the back of my head of like amazing events and whatever. But yeah, this all sits on a shelf, B. This all sits on a shelf until the perfect, 6-foot redhead Swede who speaks 4 languages walks through the door.
Yep.
Until then, I'll keep it parked. But conversely, right, the marriage, the union, the party, the event isn't a substitute for like your commitment and intention with someone. I would think it's that same it's that same logic of, we'll have a kid because the kid will make us stronger, right?
Oh, it absolutely is, and that's, to touch on something you said earlier. That's kind of one of my big problems with it. From a societal standpoint, is I think a lot of people view it as the fix, right? And it's like it's not. Like no way. Like, and if that's the fix, that's scary, right? Like that to me, that's you're in
I
dangerous water if it takes legal bounds to keep you together.
I would agree, and this is where I think it gets interesting, because if you look at like the standard timeline or trajectory of what like a normal life should be, is you go to school, you get educated, you get a job, you
Mhm.
meet someone, you get married, you have kids, and then you do the nuclear family bit, right? This is the timeline and this is the order in which it should lay out. So when these are the expectations, and this is kind of what most people are raised in, what happens when this shit doesn't go to plan? You know, what happens if you haven't got a fiance by your 20s? What happens, right? What happens if the kid, in your case where the kids come first? What happens if, say, you get married, you have the kids, you do all the right things, and then you get a divorce? Like, that's right. So how and why has marriage been one of the first major milestones that's been placed in front of every single one of us as thou must pass through this gateway in order to unlock the next adult achievement?
Yeah, I don't know, and I it doesn't sit well with me. And again, for that exact reason, it's funny too, because a couple weeks ago I was reading about marriage in the U.S. and divorce rates, and then the average age for marriage in the US is still 25. And that blew
Holy shit.
my fucking
Right.
dude, that blew my fucking mind. I was like, 25, dude? 25-year-old Brody getting married? No way, bro.
Until death do you part. Yes.
Absolutely. Oh my God. And that would have been, oh my God. And see, the thing is, too, because I think about it in the way of safety, right? Now, to look at it in the opposite, like what damage would have been done, right? So, like, if I had gotten married and it had been a divorce, like, I don't know what that would have done to my life. Again, financially, mentally, emotionally, I don't know, because again, in my head, it's like one time, and I've really protected that. So then to let that out, let that go, let someone in, and then it's fucking shattered. I don't know what would happen up here. You know what I mean? And that worries me. And I think, if I'm being honest, I think that's something a lot of people don't think about. They go into it, and again, it's still that quick fix. This is going to fix everything. We're going to be closer. We're together forever. We can't leave each other. And then, holy shit, we have to leave each other because it's fucking toxic and it's bad and it's messy. What does that do to your head?
So here's where I share a story of one of my friends. Let's call her Penny.
I like Penny.
Penny's lovely. Penny's a good friend. Penny has a boy. Let's call him Danny. So Penny and Danny. They've known each other for a while. Actually, I think they actually met on Tinder. But they dated and it became a serious thing and whatever else. Now, Danny always had a good job. I think he was in finance something, so earning whatever else. And for Penny, it looked like they were going to get married. She's in her late 20s. Yeah, mid-late 20s. They were going to get married. She was basically going to slot into the stay-at-home mum, wife, be there for the kids. And she was happy with that. And cool. And Danny was going to provide and do all the things. And that was cool as well. Then Danny decided to resign from his job, and because he was under a lot of stress and all this sort of stuff. And so because he was accomplished and because he'd achieved a few things, it shouldn't have been hard for him to find something else. 6 months passed and Danny hasn't locked anything down. But in the meantime, during the 6 months, I think they'd already set a date for their wedding. And anyone who's planned a wedding knows that comes with deposits on everything, which are non-refundable. So deposit for the dress, deposit for the venue, deposit for catering, all of this sort of stuff. Fast forward through 6 months, and Danny bought her a ring, so that was an expense. Fast forward through 6 months, and basically Danny ran out of money and hadn't told Penny. So she's working in hospo, engaged to this guy that's now technically put them both in a ton of debt, and you're supposed to be my fiance and the love of my life and all of this sort of shit, right? Bro, and so and
Danny,
he,
Danny.
right, but and so this is what's interesting, where here's a girl who's got these sort of traditional values, and this is totally fine, and they lined up, we're going to get married and have kids by this age because I still want to be a young mum and I still want to be there for them, and he's going to work and this is all going to be cool. And then they commit to this thing, and then it sort of goes really left of center. And he didn't tell her about it, and so the biggest portrayal for her was like the money, like fuck whatever, but like you couldn't tell me for whatever reason, like you couldn't find a job, or like the money was slipping away, or what did it all get spent on and all this sort of stuff. So you've basically put us at rock bottom, and we're supposed to be planning for a wedding, and I'm supposed to be marrying you.
Yeesh.
Right. And so what do you do?
You fucking have an existential crisis.
Right. And so where it is, it's so for the misfits, like put yourself in that situation, and then what do you do? You know, the girls, Penny should have been married last week. Obviously that didn't go through. Penny's going for fittings and still paying off a dress that she may or may not use. The venue has been rescheduled indefinitely, you know, because the deposit will be held until whenever they decide to reschedule it. But otherwise, yeah, tough luck. Yeah, so that's the situation where it's. I guess I'll leave it there. I guess I'll leave it there with the misfits. And what would you do? How would you manage that sort of situation?
Yeah, not just how do you manage the upsides of this thing. What are your contingencies if there is no upside?
And I guess one of the practical questions everyone has to be aware of is like, are you aware of the expense? You know, weddings in general aren't cheap. And with, I mean, I'm telling you now, we're not going to get into the politics of like men spending 3 months salary on a ring, because go fuck yourselves. Do you know where this tradition came from? And yes, fight me on it in the comments. But and also I'll go back to me. It's like, bitch, I'm the prize. Where's my ring? Right?
It's so funny that you say that, because I've actually had the same. Not that I want a giant gaudy ring, right? But it's the same. It's the thing that you're talking about. It's the principle. It's like, in my mind, it's a union. It's a union. Together, we are something.
No,
exactly. And this, as soon as I propose, I'm fucking giving everything and all to you, and that's the gratitude
transaction
of that is is my payout. Like, and again, that sounds so
well, and I'm sure there's some romantic misfits at home going, oh, but you know, you should ask my parents for permission, and then I get the ring, and then it's going to be like this. And again, I'm going to go, why? How? Okay, how has it become all about you? What? Like, again, like, are men just passengers to a marriage? And then and you can say, oh, but the principle, oh, but it's commitment and showing he cares. I'm like, I agree. I 1000% agree. So how do you show that you care, that you have equal commitment, that you're equally invested, and don't say sex? Don't say sex.
Oh no! Come on,
you
fuck off! It's a union again. It's
right.
That should be a reward for us both, not fucking one way or the other. Like, get the fuck out of here with that shit.
Right. And so I am all for it. I'm all for the commitment. I'm all for the equality and all of these sorts of things. But again, like, what is each party bringing to the table?
This is hilarious. This is unlocking a memory when I was a kid. My mom was watching Bridezilla.
Right.
Fucking awful show. I mean, these women are holy shit. I don't know how you're still getting married through all that shit. But watching it, and I kid you not, it was the first time that like human interaction made me sick to my stomach.
Wow.
I fucking
But it's
shit you not.
okay.
I know it's
It's reality
dramatized. It's a
television
reality
and mostly
TV show.
scripted and
Oh, totally. And prompted and pushed. I agree. I know. I'm just saying that happens though. And the reason that that is pressed in the way that it is because they're trying to make even the small scale of it in some way acceptable. And it's like, yo, it's the same thing we're talking about here. Who the fuck made you queen of the castle? We're not fucking married yet. Like we're not there yet. And
yeah,
you're
yeah.
this, and it's the same thing that you said. What is your level of commitment here? What is you showing me? What is you compromising with me? What is you? Because again, in my head, and I think for a lot of people, you see it in movies, you see it in society still. The woman plans this, she does that, she chooses this, she
she's been
chooses that.
dreaming about it since she's been a little girl. It's her special day. Rah rah rah.
Yeah, it's also the first day of the rest of my life too.
Well, yeah, and it's interesting. It's so to bring it. Here's an inside like misfit joke. So Miss High Value gets married in 2 weeks.
Miss High Value,
Miss High Value, and shout
reoccurring
out.
character.
Actually, yes, shout out to Miss High Value because she actually listened to the episode where she's referred to as Miss High Value, which I think was season 1, maybe episode 7 with Gigi. And this is how this whole thing came out. So she listened to it. She actually mentioned to me the other day, she's like, "Oh, I heard your podcast." She's like, "Oh," and she took it with a great sense of humor. And she's like, "Oh, actually, I have a job now. I work 2 days a week." And I'm, so she's good value, and she can take it on the chin and make fun of herself, so she gets a lot of credit. So her nickname is now officially Miss High Value. Anyway, she gets married in 2 weeks, and fun fact, Marie, who you met earlier in the season, my French friend, she's taking her photos for this event.
I love that.
Right? Isn't it cool? And so it's interesting because I was having this conversation with her this morning, as a matter of fact, just about the expense, and she's getting married and she's, planning all this shit. And it's getting to this point now where they're about 2 weeks out, and her husband to be is just kind of sick of paying for everything because it's all starting to add up. And so they've booked Marie, and that's fine. And they're thinking like, oh, maybe we need a videographer for the wedding. And so Marie's referenced a contact who's actually offered them an exceptionally good deal. And Mr. High Value is kind of like, oh, then why the fuck am I paying for this now? Why can't the photographer just do the videography? And it's a classic amateur mistake. I'm like, no, it's different cameras. It's a whole different thing. Like, and then her mum's like, oh, just get the raw footage. And I went, absolutely not. First of all, no decent videographer will give that to you. They shouldn't. And second, you don't want that for a whole bunch of reasons, and sort of educated her on that. And then anyway, so yeah, it's interesting as well because this seems to be a classic case, even though they had a kid before marriage, so they're living in sin. Wags a finger. Yeah, she's planned it all, like venue, catering, dress, what our daughter's gonna wear. At least he got to pick his suit. At least he got his own bucks night. She had her hens, like rah 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 rah. But it seems to be very much her special day, and okay, and he just seems to be a passenger. And okay, if he's busy working to do whatever, and that works for you,
Well, he's busy paying for it.
and if that works, then okay. But I guess okay, because we've taken a misfit sort of point of view on marriage, is like, are we trampling over the romance of everything?
No, because I mean we are, because we're focusing a little bit on the opposite side of the scale. But I mean at the same time, to me, no. I mean it is the commitment. It is the things that we've talked about, those intimacies, those compromises, those real moments of genuine connection that I think really truly that's what everybody's looking for. I don't know exactly how you framed it earlier in the episode, but it clicked for me, and and it's just that I want you to match me, you know what I
Mm.
mean? Like, and that's that's not always necessarily a fair expectation if you take it literally, right? Where it's like we have to be on the same level all the
Yeah,
time.
no,
That
we don't want to clone. That's not.
no,
Yeah.
and that's not what we're saying. It's just and it's funny too. In the matching of, that's when you start to learn someone, because you're almost caught off guard, right? Because you're trying to stay level, and so you guys are doing these different things to keep that connection there, and that's romantic as fuck, bro. And
I
I'm
think so.
and and look, I'll say it doesn't take. I'll say this: it doesn't take marriage to get there, because there's
Mm.
been plenty of times that I have, and I will cherish these moments for the rest of my life. Looked at Tiffany with a love and admiration I don't think I could ever have found unless it was trying to learn her. And that's watching her be a mother. That's watching her progress as a human being in general, pursue her passions, make it through hardships. You start to learn people. And I like people. People tend to actually show up. And so there is that romance and that joy and love and pureness of it that I don't think can be traded, but I don't think it involves strictly marriage to achieve that.
Hmm. Hmm. I'm inclined to agree. I'm thinking of I've got some Christian friends, Catholic and Christian friends, so church-going friends, and they're married, obviously, and they did it the right way, Brody. They got married first, and then they had kids.
Yeah, and I've read
Anyway,
the Bible twice all the way through
hey,
still.
he died. He dies in the end.
Yeah.
Spoilers.
Yep.
Um, but I think when we got talking about relationship once, and the way I was describing it, it actually resonated with them, because in their sort of world, it's like, oh, we call that dating with intent. So it's to have an intention with a person, with a potential partner, like with a view to something. So there's a slightly different, maybe deeper assessment of someone and where this is going to go, because for them in
Well,
in their
forethought,
world,
yeah.
yeah, for them in their scope, it's like, well, is this potential partner, are they going to be a good life partner, and does that involve kids for us? Because for them, the marriage is a foundational gateway to a long lasting relationship. And so that's what they would approach most of their early dating relationships with, this sort of thing. It wasn't just like to kind of date and see and kind of fuck around. It's like, no, this is where I'm heading based on my values and what I want, and whether I want a family. Because not all married couples or even Christian couples want or can have kids, and that's totally fine. And so that's what's your
Yeah,
take? Yeah.
interesting that you bring up religion, because, like, I mean, that's a big thing for me, and kind of the institution of marriage,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And it's kind of weird, like, diving into it from this angle. I can't help but to agree with that, and that's, maybe I've taken a prolonged approach, or maybe a little safer approach, and there's a level of risk that you have to commit to that kind of thing. And I think what's, again, weird about it being religious, that falls so nicely with faith, right? Do I have faith that this person can become or be this person that I envision in my mind? And then it kind of raises another question for me too. It's like, okay, if I'm moving that way though, how and maybe because you're in a religious community, it's a little bit easier.
Mm.
But say you weren't and you had those principles, religious principles are for a lot of people non-negotiables. If we don't agree in that aspect, I can't
It's a
raise
deal breaker.
children with you. I can't, there's too many things that'll be a problem later on. But, just moving with that intent, how many people is it likely that you're going to land on that do have the same principles as you, saying you don't have the religious structure to navigate that. So it just kind of feels like those people are, SOL. It's like, how long and strenuous is that search? Because think about how many fucking different people and perspectives and non-negotiables there are out there.
Yeah.
And it's a weird thing to sit here and think about and talk out loud, because then it makes me realize where some of my discrepancies with marriage come from. It's that exact thing. What are my non-negotiables that I haven't necessarily put into clear view? They're there, and they might be in my peripheral, and that's kind of why I'm safe right now. But what am I or am I not committing to in those? So it's kind of, that's where it led me. It was a weird kind of train of thought in my head when we were working that through. And I would hope that anybody in that situation, though, would know that, if you're a possibility, the person that matches you is a possibility too, like that. It just by statistics, what I mean? Look at how many of us there are, it would be such a wild notion to believe that that's not real for everyone in some degree or some sense. But like I said, I just don't think it needs to be a particular institution to achieve that for anybody or any certain relationship or dynamic. And yeah, it's weird working this out. I think this has kind of given me a better clarity into myself and kind of why I've been apprehensive of it in my own life.
I mean, I've got friends who have just had the civil union probably down at the town hall. It's like I'm here, you're here. There's a witness. Great, bang, done. And I've had other friends who have got divorced exactly the same way. Right. Reasonably civil, just like great, right. Thanks. We'll part our separate ways and whatever. Yep. I guess this is the sort of flip side to the argument. Then if marriage is the end, if it's the end game, or if it's a pinnacle of relationships, then what happens when it fails? And if divorce is still at 50-50, there's a lot of explanations for this. And I would lean more into the party of it's because people have realized they don't have to stay in shit relationships, as opposed to generations prior, where it was, again, the expectation was marriage, and the expectation was, well, marriage is unbreakable. You are in this contract for life, whether you like it or not.
Why? Like I've that
God says. I mean,
but,
okay.
Oh my God!
No, like, sure, but here's the elephant in the room. Like marriage is a religious institution. It's the separation of church and state in most countries, in most democratic nations, in Australia, definitely. There's supposed to be one in the US. So the marriage is a religious institution, and so with that comes the values, the expectation, the baggage, the rules and regulation of this is how it will be. I mean, there's most Catholic, Christian, Judeo-Christian marriage ceremonies still involve the vows of thou shalt obey the husband. Right now, that's been out of date for many of us for the last 20 to 30 years. But again, for some, family values, for some, religious values, for some, that works for them. That's great. But so if you look back in prior generations, this is why you couldn't get out of it. Marriages will fall apart, families will fall apart. It will be the end of civilization as we know it. none of that's the case. But the flip side to that is, my grandmother is a perfect example. My grandmother Barbara, she turns 93 today, so I'll be calling her as soon as we're done here.
Happy birthday, Grandma.
Right. Her first marriage, 4 kids. Guy turns out to be an alcoholic, abusive alcoholic, post World War II. Right. Okay. Right. So not a great situation to be in, as a woman, not a great situation to be in. As a mother, not a great situation to be in. She was a church-going woman, Anglican, if I recall correctly, married in the church, all of that. And, the advice constantly from, the pastor, the father, the powers that be was like, oh, you've got to support him, and oh, it's the devil, and oh, it's all this sort of shit. It's like, no, he's a fucking alcoholic, the rules of marriage, the laws of marriage is you will stand by your man, you will abide this, because it is a sin, a mortal sin, to break this contract. Fast forward, she does eventually break this contract. She is excommunicated from the church. She eventually finds my grandfather, who is a much, much better man, who until the day he died was with her, and together they were parenting to about 8 or 9 children. So I have all the all the aunts and uncles, all the cousins, all this sort of thing, right? So it all kind of worked out in the end, but no thanks to the institution that was marriage. Right?
Okay, you're right.
And this is one of these fun facts that most of the remember the good old days traditional values folk tend to just love to gloss over, or just, oh, it's such a minority. I'm like, you know what? I bet it isn't. I bet it isn't. And I bet, even men, marry with the best of intentions to figure out that, geez, the woman I'm with, has a whole bunch of stuff that I wasn't aware of, or, whatever. It doesn't work out. Arguably my longest relationship, which was 5 years, somewhere in there we should have been married, right? And then only to discover, baby's got issues with money and runs away from all the problems and lies about it. And that's not exactly someone I want to spend my life with, but for some reason it took a lot of circumstances and obstacles to pile up for this to occur.
Right.
So
falling back on that thing I said earlier, faith, right? Do I have faith that that person has the constitution to continue being that person regardless of the scenario? And that's that's rare as fuck.
Right. And I guess in this situation specifically, I would ask, why would you preserve the institution of marriage over your own well-being, or yourself, or your soul? Why would you preserve an abstract concept? Why would you preserve even the perception of being the happily married? Because I'll save that for another time. Because even today there's a lot of unhappy married couples.
So that was my question in this conversation, right? We've talked about the dynamics, we've talked about the downs, the ups, and then the commitment, right? And there's that negative side of commitment. Explaining your grandmother's story, it's like then you ask yourself, like we're talking about, when does the value of the institution stop weighing more than self, right? At what point? At what fucking point? Is it when the person's a pure devil? Is it when you've been beaten? Is it when you're exhausted? Is what? And again, to me, if we're talking about it from a religious standpoint, it's bizarre to me that any higher power would constitute that kind of binding agreement to make someone unhappy.
My unconditional love of this deity bestowed upon you involves you living through and surviving this trauma, because right?
Because, and
Because,
simple as that. I mean, really, you said
you
it
know,
earlier. Where else
path.
is it other
And
than
again, like if you're homosexual, if you're gay or lesbian, you either can or can't be under these certain conditions, and you can't join our club because I love you unconditionally, but you can't get married here.
yep,
um,
yep.
with, you know, all of that. So it's, yeah, again, like commitment is one thing. And let's, Jesus Christ, I mean, we seem to have skipped over just even happiness. Like somehow that seems to be devoid of the conversation. We're 50 minutes into it and I discovered, like, shouldn't you be happy in a marriage? Shouldn't you be happy in relationships? Shouldn't you be, you know, or more happy than not?
Yes.
Right?
Very, yeah, no, and you know what? Look, it's a conversation, Tiffany and I had a couple years back, and she brought it to my attention, and it was kind of an eye-opening moment where it was, going through a rough period of time, and then you really sit down and have the honest conversation. Is the good outweighing the bad right now? And when you get to that point that you're not sure, number one, it's scary because it feels like the good's slipping away completely. There's no memory of it, right? Bad outweighs good in the sense that the gravity of it feels heavier every single time. So, that's happiness. It's light. It's up there. It's far away. It's distant. And then you're in the dark and you're in the clouds, and yeah, I don't know. And it falls back to my question, when do you decide that not having the happiness is when you leave? But then too, when is it, this is something I need to actively be working towards, right? Because I think that's another problem with a lot of modern relationships, is that it is that projection that my partner should be taking care of me. And it's like, no, we should be taking care of each other. And that's when we find happy, right? Like, I mean, in my mind anyways.
I agree. Look, I agree. There's a certain there's a certain emotional capacity that is your responsibility, and making me happy isn't one of them. Um, in our 20s, and I will hand up, in our 20s, it's sort of like, well, you come at relationships with like, it's your job to make me happy,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
And I might reciprocate, who knows? But
If
like
it
you're
serves me.
if I'm with you, I'm supposed to be happy with you all the time. um and so with a little bit of maturity, you come to realize, well, no, like my emotional state and my happiness is contingent on me. There's some things that if I'm in a relationship, actually, I think it's more to do with it. If I'm in a relationship with you, then I don't want you to negatively impact that. I don't want you to actively make me unhappy.
Ooh,
I
wow,
think that,
bro.
right. Yeah, I think that's my spicy
Wow.
take.
Wow. 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 Whew. Um, I think that's how I felt my whole fucking life. And I
Okay.
didn't know how to put that into words.
I only
Again,
just found it now. So
yeah, it's not necessarily that I'm looking for you to take responsibility for me of. It's that I don't want you to affect negatively what I am working so goddamn hard to build.
right. And this and then we can see that if you're aligned on values, if you're aligned on values and what you want, and if you can communicate this with said partner, that's commitment, isn't it? Like that's honesty, that's communication,
Yep.
that's commitment. And again these are my values, because it's in my little misfit world. It's like I'm always going to be an independent fucking misfit child, and do travel and do all these sorts of misfit things. If you came to me with the expectation of, we'll get married and then you'll provide for me, uh no, no. Like even when I can, No.
Yeah. It's
That's
not. Yeah, it's not about the ability to. Let's
no,
get
no.
that
It
straight,
is it is
Misfits. That's not.
absolutely,
Yeah, no.
and it won't be. But even if anyone came to me with that expectation of, as a friend or as a lover or whatever else, because you can and you're a man, you'll protect me and you'll take care of. I'm like, and I'd go, why? Like, what then is unique unto you?
I agree. I agree.
So,
Look,
that's because I value and I'm built around independence and autonomy. So I'm going to love someone that has the same personal values. If she's like, swear to God, I fell in love with a Swedish girl one afternoon who was having an argument with her boyfriend in the shopping aisle supermarket because he must have been teasing her about something about like, typical Preed, you're so proud, like rah rah rah. She turned to him dead in the eye. She's like, fucking right, I'm proud. I'm Swedish. I don't need a man. And I went, oh, I'd marry you. it's the, like for me, like strong independent women are the hottest fucking thing in the world, and that's the sort of queen that I'd want to build a kingdom with, someone who can get shit done.
what if this is just a random thought.
Yeah.
And I just had two. This is ADHD fucking popping in here. Number one, I want to say to the Misfits, this is a message that I wanted to give Danny from Penny and Danny's story. Danny, if you're having trouble looking for work, put yourself in the contract space for 3 months and you'll never have a problem looking for work again. That goes for any misfit. If you really want to figure out how to look for work, come up with a contract. And and then the second thing is that same notion that you're talking about, the strong independent woman, like why it's so funny because to me, in where I'm at in my culture, that's not what men are looking for.
Really?
Oh man, I mean, typically, and fall back to our toxic masculinity episode, Misfits. I think the contingency is submissiveness, and that's my dogs. Sorry.
No, I can barely hear it. So if I
Go.
can barely hear it and Misfits can barely hear it, but
Good,
whatever.
good. I'll cut them out. But yeah, no, it is it then. It's strange to me because you gave the example of them in the aisles. Is it that men are scared of that?
Oh, look, ask any of our female Misfits. Probably. Who knows? Right.
Because you said that and I was triggered too. I liked it. I was like, I think I would like that too. Like it wouldn't strike me as negative for her to have a strong
right
opinion that she stands in. That shit, yeah, it tickles
I
me.
think specifically, I think that's it. I think there's a big, I think females, this is probably an episode for us, but I think female strength is extraordinarily misrepresented. I think female strength and intelligence is it's and normally because it will go against the status quo, normally because in corporate it's more likely to have a population of more heavily populated by men, and so women will be a minority, and so then empowered women at certain roles with authority will be more of a minority, so you're generally going to go against the grain. And so this is where I tend to make the logical argument that, well, isn't the backlash to these things not so much sexism, racism, everything else, but it's more to do with social intelligence, where a majority opinion will form simply based on a majority, and a minority opinion will always seem controversial and be pushed down simply because it's the minority. Right, it's got less
trigger a lot of people.
Well, but again, like, let's have that discussion, because I had this discussion with a female professional once, because she gave me the, well, like, men are just like this. I'm like, well, or was it that case, or was it like this also? And she's like, actually, now that you mention it, when she was at school, because she was slightly taller, she got picked on because she was tall. And the short girl got picked on because she was short. And the fat one got picked on because she was fat. And the redhead got picked on because no one else was redhead. You see, so social intelligence arranges itself in such a way. And sometimes this is the case. And I would reason, we're getting way off topic, but I would reason that this is more often the case where it comes to resistance, rather than people are like, they're racist, they're sexist, they're against X, Y, and Z. Like
But it doesn't fall
and
so far off topic, because I mean, if you look at the lens that we're viewing this through, I think this right now is what's stopping a lot of men and women from finding each other in marriage, from finding each other in that union, because there's the disconnect in the value of the role we each play to each other.
that is interesting. That is interesting, especially because I almost got into a back and forth with some dude bro on LinkedIn yesterday about why high value women are single. I'm like, bro, this is an article from 4 years ago, and this has been debunked. And even so, if that's the case, their problems and your problems aren't my problems. All the best. Anyway, fuck, we had that chat, but yeah. Misfits, if you're on LinkedIn, you can go through my comments and find it and have a giggle. But yeah, okay, what have we covered today? We've talked about everything. We've solved nothing, which is typical Misfits episode. We talked about commitment and how it's not inextricably linked to marriage. Marriage is nice for some for different reasons. I probably want to have the party, whatever. It'll have nothing to do with God. Like what else? Values, yes, values, all of that sort of stuff. Brody's living in sin. He's living in sin 5 times. So he's going to like 5 different types of hell because he
just hit
the
did it all
different
wrong.
levels
On the way.
That's down. That's it. 7 realms.
Let's go.
2 more kids, man, and you're there.
well, one's coming. So I mean, like, yeah, we're just chucking along.
Oh, brilliant! So, all right, Misfits, let us know what you think. Let us know whether marriage is the be all and end all, whether it worked out for you, whether divorce has ruined modern relationships and families, and it's the downfall of civilization.
Yeah, and I mean, shit, just ask yourself how you feel about the damn thing. I mean, that's, I think, one thing that you really have to do. Stop and pause, and how do I feel about this thing? Not how does my religion tell me to feel, not just how mom and dad tell me how to feel. How do I feel about this institution, about this union, about this for my life? And I think if you do, you might find that you're a little misfit too.
Yeah, well said. Well said. All right, so that's episode 14. Coming up for episode 15. Do you know what we're talking about, Brody?
It's love or loss.
Take a drink every time Brody doesn't know what's coming up in the next episode.
But I know.
All right, flip a coin. Flip a coin and pick one.
It's loss.
Well done. Yes. So
did it. You guys don't have to drink.
Spit that drink back out. Episode 15, we're talking about loss. We're talking about grief. We're talking about loss of relationships, whether that's deaths in the family, whether that's breakups, divorces, all these sorts of things, where we're going to get into it, Misfits. So be aware. We'll try not to make it a complete Debbie Downer episode. We'll try and make it constructive, but at the same time, we're not going to shy away from the complicated subjects because you should know us by now.
Yep.
B, is there anything you're looking forward to talking about it next episode?
No. Actually, I've said this to you before. I love these conversations with you, and I love the Misfits. So to work through something that's directly affected me so recently, I'm looking forward to that.
Well said. Well said. Likewise, I seldom get the time and the opportunity to talk as deeply about subjects like this that I do with you and everyone listening at home. Even with friends that I have who live upstairs, right? Don't really get the time and the details. So this is, I think it's good for everyone. And for you misfits listening at home, we hope it's good for you too. So that's what's coming up next episode. In the meantime, you can listen for free and you can watch us build on all the platforms, on YouTubes and Spotify's and TikToks and all that sort of stuff. You can support us and support our not being married on Patreon. Support Brody Living in Sin, support my coffee addiction on Patreon, and you can get every episode 2 weeks in advance. So you could be listening to Lost now, and you could be listening to episode 16 now, right now, as well. In the meantime, I've been Chris.
I've been Brody.
And you stay classy, Misfits. We'll see you on the next one.